All right, welcome back everyone to my round 5 recap from the Qatar Masters. In this game, I played International Master Muthaiah from India, and my opponent actually played none other than Magnus Carlsen a few rounds prior. I believe it was round 3. So it was fun to look at how Magnus beat my opponent and try and get inspiration from that. But in preparing for this game, I realized that Muthaiah can basically play everything. I was looking at e4 on move 1, and I saw that he plays Sicilian and Caro-Kann and French and some games with e4, e5, also some games with Pierts. So I really didn't know what to expect. But I decided to play e4 and kind of went into the game thinking that we're just going to play chess, have a battle. And that's definitely what happened. He went for the Sicilian. I played knight to f3. This deviated from my previous round against Josiah Stearman, where I played knight c3 and went for a Grand Prix attack. I figured that if my opponent here is playing Sicilian, then I didn't want to be too predictable. And knight f3 it's a bit less common of a move for me. Usually I prefer knight c3 on move 2. But I did have an idea in mind against basically what my opponent played. He went for e6. I played knight c3. He played knight c6, and we transpose into an open Sicilian. After queen c7, this is the Taimanov. And this is actually an opening that I've played for probably the last 10 to 15 years from the black side. I've played it on and off. I've definitely mixed things up over the years, but I've enjoyed playing this position. From the black side, from the white side, I don't get this position too often, but it is nice having experience from the other side because I have a lot of different ideas I can play. And the move I ended up playing here is a move that I only discovered a few months ago. I was watching the World Cup in Baku, and a good friend of mine, Ray Robson, was playing a match against Alex Fuhr. And in his match, he got this position. It was, I believe, his first game of the World Cup. And yeah, he played a move that I didn't even know existed. This move being knight c to b5. And there's a lot of different moves for white. There's bishop e3, bishop e2, there's f4, there's g3. But knight cb5 is not a move that I was at all aware is even playable for white. It looks a little bit strange to just attack the queen. And yeah, once the queen moves back to b8, it seems like a6 is coming. And yeah, it seems like white's just going to be wasting time moving the knight again. And a6 is almost always a useful move for black in these structures. But the reason why Ray Robson went for this, and the reason why I went for this, is it's an interesting surprise weapon, and it's one way to at least provoke the opponent to start thinking early on, because it's just super, super rare. I'll quickly show the database here. Yeah, you have to look down pretty far to find knight cb5. Maybe, yeah, the 10th most popular move about. To explain this move chess-wise, the reason for playing this is not only to get a tempo on the queen, but it's to over-defend the knight on d4, so white can play bishop to d3 in this position. And this just leads to a different way of developing. We should note that in this position, white can't play bishop d3 because it just hangs in knight. So after knight b5 and then bishop d3, it's just a different setup for white that a lot of players probably won't be familiar with. And my opponent started to take time here. He took about 10 minutes to play knight to e7. I will note that if black plays a6 in this position, then I would take on c6, and yeah, whatever pawn takes back, I would play knight c3. I believe the Ray Robson game went like dc6, knight c3, e5, and castle. I will say that there's a lot of different branches that both sides can choose in this opening. So I actually didn't do too much specific preparation apart from just knight cb5 and bishop d3. And after knight ge7, I was on my own. This is not a move I looked at beforehand, but I still knew opening principles, like I want to develop, I want to castle. And here I started with bishop to e3, which does overdefend the knight. And after pawn a6, I decide to take on c6 first. And after he takes back, I retreat to c3. Now, I should note that this is actually a gambit type idea. I am leaving my pawn on b2 undefended, and black could consider taking it, but I wasn't scared of this during the game. And if black does go for queen takes b2, my plan was to play knight a4, hitting the queen, preparing some knight b6 ideas. And yeah, there's a calculation like queen b4, I have c3, getting out of check, hitting the queen, and defending the knight. And I thought there's going to be a lot of compensation with knight b6 coming. And white just has a pleasant lead in development because, yeah, the queen's getting kicked around and all my minor pieces are developed and pretty well coordinated too. So my opponent did not take on b2. Instead, he played pawn to d6. I castle. And yeah, for a few moves, a pawn is just hanging, but I don't think it's ever good for black to take. So here my opponent played knight to g6. And here I keep improving with pawn to f4. And I figured that this is actually a very pleasant situation to be out of the opening. Like I have very harmonious development. I'm castled, and I have now a nice space advantage in the center and on the king side. Now there's ideas of maybe eventually playing f5 or e5, and especially if black castles king side, then there's going to be a lot of attacking ideas in the middle game. So my opponent plays bishop to e7, and I start with a move queen to h5. And I was very happy to just have this square for my queen. And one of the downsides with having the knight on g6 instead of, usually the knight develops to f6 in the opening, but the downside is the knight's not controlling h5, and there's no g6 to kick the queen away. So my queen is actually very stable on h5. And I figured later that if black does castle, then there's ideas of lifting the rook and eventually mating, like if h6 and maybe f5 and bishop takes h6 and just sack everything and mate. So I was feeling very optimistic here. And I was a little bit surprised that my opponent decided to castle after just a couple of minutes of thinking, because it seems kind of risky, but I guess it is called for. And it's still a question how I carry through with an attack. And in this position, I decided to play knight to a4. The reason why I didn't go for rook f3 is black is now able to take on b2, and this would be an issue with my rook and knight undefended. So I took a moment to play knight a4, and not only does this defend b2, but it has a threat of knight b6, which I think wins material, because if rook a7, there's knight takes c8, and the rook would be hit by the bishop. So yeah, it's still very uncomfortable for black in this position. And my opponent ended up playing pawn to e5, which is definitely a confrontational move. He is challenging my pawn on f4, and black is basically dreaming of being able to trade the pawns and getting a knight to e5, where this would be a very nice central outpost square. But I didn't allow it. I played pawn to g3. Now, I will say that f5 was an attractive option, but I wasn't sure about the line with knight f4, and I didn't want to trade off my darks for bishop to win a pawn. I think black has enough compensation here. And there was another idea instead of f5 and instead of g3. There was an idea to play knight b6. I was actually very close to playing this move because it does seem like white wins material, but I didn't play it because I thought that black maybe has pawn takes pawn, and yeah, I can't take the rook right away if I move back. I thought there's cases where black will sack the exchange, and then there's this annoying pawn on f4 with bishop f6 to follow. So I thought g3 kept more attacking options open, and I didn't want to be too materialistic when there's so much attacking potential for white in this middle game. So g3 it was, and it's a nice move, reinforcing and restricting this knight. My opponent took on f4, I take back, and then he plays queen to b4. And this was a bit of a surprise because it seems like the queen is very exploitable on b4. And this gave me the chance to play knight to b6. attacking the rook, essentially forcing rook b8. And then we get to a very interesting position where I took a long think here, trying to figure out how to exploit this queen on b4, because it's very close to being trapped. I do want to note that my queen does help control the fifth rank, so a5 is off limits. The bishops also take away squares from the queen. So moves like c3 and a3 almost trap the queen, but of course b2 is hanging, so it's not so easy to win the queen in this position. So I was considering moves like rook b1, and I'm not entirely sure why I didn't go for rook b1, but I ended up going for the move pawn a3. And the reason why I went for this was there were some very interesting kind of deep calculations, which I will show. But this move basically forces queen takes b2. And I was a little bit surprised because it took him about 7 minutes to play this move. And I still don't know what else he was considering, but maybe he was just calculating the ramifications after he takes a pawn. And now I play rook to b1. And what I was expecting in this position is queen to f6. And then I was going to play knight to d5, which basically wins material after pawn takes e5, rook takes b8. White goes up the exchange for pawn. And I was trying to make sense of this position, but I'm pretty sure white is for choice here, given that I do have the material advantage and my bishops are very strong in the position. I was calculating a little bit further, queen e6, I was going to play queen d5, and after queen g4, king h1, my king would be very safe here, rook g1 is coming. So this is basically the line I was seeing back from when I played pawn a3. But we didn't go into that because instead of playing queen f6, my opponent played a move which I was not at all expecting. I was a little bit concerned when this move came on the board, knight takes f4. So I was aware of this idea in other lines where my queen is counterattacked, but I didn't consider it in this specific line. And for a few minutes, I was just staring at this position, trying to comprehend what's going on, because there's just so many things happening with both queens attacked, the knight's attacked, but my knight is also vulnerable. And the move, of course, that I want to play is bishop takes f4. I should note I can't take with the rook because then my rook on b1 would hang with check. So I want to play bishop takes f4, but then black has queen d4 check, and the knight is going to be lost. I don't have bishop e3, king g2, rook takes b6. Black, I think, is doing okay here. I was calculating lines of e5 and targeting h7, but then there's g6. So it's just a big mess after knight takes f4. And after a few minutes, I came to the realization that I have pretty nice looking candidate move, knight takes c8. And after some time calculating this move, it became pretty clear that this is almost certainly my best option. I did end up taking the bishop. And at first, when I was looking at this position, now it's even more chaotic because both queens are still hanging. My knight is hanging on c8. Black's knight is hanging on f4. The bishop's hanging on e7. Just seems like everything is attacking everything in this position. Not to mention there's ideas of queen takes b1 to get 2 rooks for the queen. And on top of that, my bishop's attacked. There's still ideas of h7 happening. So it's just super, super crazy. And sometimes positions like this, you just have to hunker down and calculate and look at all the variations ahead. And I concluded here that in every single variation, I'm going to come out with some material advantage or some positional advantage because there's really not too many options for black, given that I'm threatening to take the bishop with check. So any queen move, I just take with check. I'm going to be up material. And the only other option which happened in the game is knight takes h5. But again, I take the bishop with check, forcing king h8, and then I take the queen. And we got to a position where after the dust has settled a little bit, I have 2 bishops for rook and pawn. But this is by far a preferable position for white. And I'm pretty sure back when my opponent played knight takes f4, I don't think he saw the issue with knight takes c8. So once we got to this position, I was feeling very, very good because the bishops are just going to be super strong in that game. And going forward from here, my opponent played rook a2, trying to win my a3 pawn. And it's not the easiest pawn to defend, but I was very happy with the resource I came up with. I started with rook f5, attacking the knight, and after knight f6, I found a really nice multi-purpose move, bishop f4. And the nice idea behind this move is not only
items, 1 total, $20 MSG. Huge thank you to the kindest IM in the world. Smile.
Wait, what? Thanks. I just got distracted by the merch alert. Yeah, friendly reminder, if you want to get merch, we have coupon code Qatar, save 15% off, shop.imrosen.com. I appreciate the slight interruption to this recap. What was I saying? So the idea with bishop d4 was twofold. One idea is if rook takes a3, I was going to sacrifice the rook! And there's a really nice mating idea with my bishop and knight just taking away all the squares from the black king. So rook f6 is just a very big threat. But not only that, with bishop d4, I'm controlling the a1 square. So this bishop works on both sides of the board. And because I'm controlling a1, I have the idea of playing rook a5 next, and then knight b4, which would trap the rook, because I'm taking away all the squares from the rook on a2. And it turns out that there's really no good way for black to prevent both this threat and the threat of rook a5, knight b4. But my opponent tried to play on. He played knight d7. But after rook a5, there's really no stopping knight b4. So he tried to play knight c5, hitting my bishop. But I was very happy to play knight b4. And after takes, I'm now up a piece for just a pawn. Now, my opponent tried knight e1, and at first I thought this move was very clever because he's attacking my c2 pawn, and he's also threatening to fork my bishop and king. And when I saw this move coming, I thought I'm going to end up losing this pawn. But it turns out I just have a very simple move to keep everything defended, pawn c3, defending the bishop, getting the pawn to a safe square. And from this moment on, the conversion was pretty straightforward. My opponent did fight. He played rook e8, but then I take the pawn, and he can't take on e4 because he gets back rank mated. So he played h6, making Luft, but I take on d6, and now I have an extra pawn on top of the extra bishop. So life is very good here. He takes on e4, and I did have the chance to take on h6, but then I saw a different idea of trying to just trap his knight. I started with king to f2, and after king h7, I played knight to b4. And now my knight and my king work together to control all the squares that this knight on e1 can move to. Basically, this knight on e1 is completely trapped. And this is actually a common theme towards the end of the game, is first black's rook got trapped on a2, and now this knight is getting trapped on e1. But I'm not actually winning the knight right away. It's just stuck, and because the knight can't move, the rook is stuck defending it. So going forward from here, black tried to storm the pawns, but after a4, f5, a5, f4, it looks like I'm just going to win the race. And I was very close to just playing a6 and trying to queen as quickly as possible. But I saw that there's some idea of f3 and rook e2, and it's winning for white, but I didn't want to take any sort of risk. And I played the move rook d5 here with the unstoppable idea of rook e5 to simplify. And after g4, we do trade rooks. Now it's this rook that has no way of escaping the trade. And after takes, knight f3, bishop takes f4. My opponent resigned in this position. And this concludes what was my first win of the tournament. This puts me at 2.5 out of 5. And I think overall, this was a very pleasant game on my part. I felt like I got the nice opening surprise, got the nice middle game attack, and my opponent was under enough pressure in the middle game to essentially miscalculate, and I think the endgame conversion was very clean. So as usual, I have not checked the game with the engine, but I will do some quick engine analysis. Now I did forget to make a new chapter, so I guess the first step is to enable engine analysis. And yeah, for anyone that wants to like do this on Lichess, it's completely free. You just click this button, whether it's analysis board or Lichess study. You do have to give the server some time to crunch. I might have to refresh the page. Yeah, this way people can see everything. Let's try refreshing. Okay. Wow, so I was never worse this game. We can see... Wait, I played a perfect game. Really? There is some small blip. Okay, let's go through. So I really play a perfect game. 97. Okay, bishop e3. Let's keep going. Yeah, queen b2 is not good for black. So that was a right conclusion. And then going forward, yeah, it seems like all of this was very fine. I'm curious about this moment. Now, this is interesting. I have a feeling the engine is not on high enough depth to like fully understand things. Although, okay, it does say a3 keeps advantage, but apparently knight takes c8 was a better choice. And then b3. Yeah, this is not a line I considered. Engine just wants to play solidly. I guess it makes sense to keep the bishop pair and just have a positional advantage. But a3 was definitely the more tactical move. And after queen b2, so black had to play queen a2. And I didn't mention this, but after the game, my opponent was asking me what I was going to play against queen a2. And I confessed to him that I didn't actually consider this move. But at the very least, I have a draw with rook a1 and repeat. But what is the engine saying? Is this just a draw? Engine saying king h1. I will say that if he played queen a2, I was going to take time to calculate here. But I guess I didn't have to worry about this because, yeah, knight takes f4 was played. And yeah, that's just a huge blunder. Missing knight takes c8. Apparently queen f3 is also winning. And the rest of the game was, yeah, pretty clean. So, yeah, very satisfying day. Again, I am 2.5 out of 5. Tomorrow is a rest day. So if you're watching this recap on October 16th, there's no game. Myself and Jonathan Trance will have a break from from the tournament. But do tune in to the Twitch channel on October 17th. Jonathan will be back doing live commentary. I don't know who I'm playing the next game. Pairings might go up in the next few hours. But I'm looking forward to getting more sleep on the rest day, hopefully having some good food. Maybe I'll try and take a selfie with a camel. I heard there's camels in Qatar. So yeah, stay tuned for more chess, and I'll see you guys soon.